For more on that, we have joining us today Dr. Bong Young-shik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you back on the show.
Very pleased to be here.
As we just heard in that report, Pyongyang has not reacted kindly to Washington's latest sanctions. They released a statement condemning Washington's latest actions and even saying that it could block the path to denuclearization forever. I think it's that word forever which is catching people's eyes. I mean, what do you make of this statement?
North Korean leadership is basically telling the United States that it is not time or place for the United States to put one more agenda on the table when negotiations on denuclearization of North Korea and building trust and diplomatic normalization between the two countries have been stalemated. So you have to do first things first. That is basically the gist of the message delivered by North Korean authority. But at the same time, the human rights abuses inside North Korea is something that is going to emerge anyway, something that North Korea cannot escape from, because at the end of this international society's engagement with North Korea and its assistance to bring North Korea to the state of a normal state with prosperity, not just weapons of mass destruction, will require massive financial assistance to shore up dilapidated North Korean economy. In that context, Japan's role is paramount because without normalization with Japan, DPRK, North Korea, cannot really expect to get the seed money to start off its national economy and industrialization. The closest analogy is the 1965 normalization treaty between South Korea and Japan, in which Japan provided $800 million in many different forms of economic grant and restitution for the colonial past. So think about the figure that North Korea would demand Japan pay in restitution in case of normalization treaty is going to be signed between the two countries. But without trust between North Korea and Japan, then Japanese society will not allow its government to agree upon normalization treaty with North Korea. The outstanding issue is the abduction issue of Japanese citizens. So without resolution of that critical issue lying between the two countries, then there wouldn't be any normalization treaty between Japan and North Korea. Thereby, North Korea cannot expect to have the massive financial assistance and compensation from Japan that are essential for rapid and early industrialization of North Korean economy. So even for North Korea's future survival and prosperity, dealing with human rights issues with all the surrounding countries is something that North Korean leadership has to face, whether it likes or not.
So you've touched upon a lot of issues there, but let me go back to the actual statement that was released by Pyongyang. I mean, it's not the first time we've heard these kind of condemning statements of the US, and it probably won't be the last time. I'm sure we'll see many more of these. So the question becomes, how seriously should we take these kind of messages and threats that are carried in the North Korean state media?
Of course, we have to take every statement issued by any authority of the North Korean government, even some organizations outside the official channel of North Korean government as seriously as they deserve to be. But it is very interesting that the statement was issued by the Policy Research Director of the Institute for American Studies at North Korea's Foreign Ministry, whose name is still unbeknownst. Anybody.
Yeah, of course, yes. The statement didn't come with a name, just with a
in
position.
front of camera, I can only tell you that it's not me, right? But
Right.
other than that, we have no idea that who actually is responsible for this statement. But at the same time, North Korea wants to maintain this kind of tactical ambiguity, saying that it is not really an outright threat that we will scrap our agreement with the United States and possibly resume in the early part of 2019 with a new test of intercontinental ballistic missiles or seventh nuclear test. We wouldn't go that far, but you should not rule out that possibility. Because North Korea does not want to abandon its strategic benefit North Koreans are not that stupid to abandon the current situation that favor North Korea, which makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for the Trump administration to turn to any type of military operations in the name of maximum pressure on North Korea. Because unless North Korea is going to first break out of the Singapore summit meeting and conduct any type of missile or nuclear test or armed conflict with South Korea or Japan, then it is almost impossible for Trump administration to justify turn the ball to the Pentagon, not the State Department, in favor of taking military operations. So I don't think North Korean leadership is ready to cross that line yet.
To me, it also seems that the U.S. has have a similar take on this as well, because an official from the U.S. State Department responded to the statement after questions from a different media organization, saying that they are confident Kim Jong-un will stick to his promise to denuclearize, and that's pretty much all they said to it. It seems to me that they're officially just shrugging it off, and they don't take this kind of statement seriously. Do you see it that way as well? Do you think the U.S. will be fazed at all by this kind of statement?
I think it's a shrugging off the statement by a North Korean authority, which is not clear who is actually responsible for or who is actually behind this statement, or how serious North Korean authority actually is to actually carry out the so-called ambiguous threat of resumption of missile and nuclear tests. So the United States seems to respond to very ambiguous action and words by North Korean authority in the same way, just shrugging off and maintain very ambiguous position that, well, if you have to stick to your promises that you made in the Singapore summit meeting. And the underlying assumption is that time favors the United States, because as long as economic sanctions remain in place.
It seems like pressure on North Korea looks like it will continue for a little bit while further, because the UN is set to pass another resolution for the 14th year in a row condemning North Korea's human rights abuses. Do you think there'll be more kind of statements condemning these, the UN and US actions from Pyongyang again? I think so, because North Korean authority, even before the inauguration of the current regime, Kim Jong-un regime, during his father's time, Kim Jong-il, expressed a great deal of sensitivity and resentment to international community's call for improvement of human rights situation inside North Korea, that there is no room for infringement of the sovereign independence of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the name of human rights. So I think the similar line of reasoning will prevail for this current regime under the leader of Kim Jong-un. So yes, more cycle of objections and US pressure. But there's that side, then there's the other side of actually US President Trump. Now, he tweeted on Friday about North Korea, and the tweet, if I'll read it in full because it's not very long, many people have asked how we are doing in our negotiations with North Korea. I always reply by saying we are in no hurry. There is a wonderful potential for great economic success for that country. Kim Jong-un sees it better than anyone and will fully take advantage of it for his people. We are doing just fine. Now, what do you make of that kind of statement coming from Trump, and then previously the US State Department issuing sanctions, etc.? It'll be very difficult for Trump administration to admit that since the Singapore summit meeting on June 12th, things have not been going well. It has maintained that it was a right decision by Washington to have the first ever summit meeting with the leadership of the adversary country, which is North Korea, for the sake of giving a chance to top-down approach to the potential settlement of the nuclear missile issues with North Korea. So it is politically rational for Trump administration to emphasize all the positives, not negatives. For instance, since beginning of 2018, this year, United States has been safe from verbal threats of military actions by North Korea to any part of the mainland of the United States. North Korea has not conducted any more missile or nuclear tests, which can be regarded as a huge achievement by the Trump administration. So
it is only natural of Trump administration to emphasize those positive elements. And as I said, that Trump administration's, well, no pun intended, Trump card is that as long as economic sanctions are on North Korea, then there's nothing that for the United States to hurry, because it is North Korea that is bleeding. It is not the United States that is not bleeding, as long as North Korea's nuclear missile threats have not been increased.
Do you think this shows, at least, that despite these statements from North Korea and despite US issuing new sanctions, that ultimately it's Trump and ultimately it's Kim Jong-un who are the real people who can make the big decisions here, and that as long as Trump is on in a positive message and Kim Jong-un stays on a positive message, that there is still hope for things to go smoothly and not go back to the previous paradigm that he had with fire and fury and threats and threat of nuclear war?
Well, I wouldn't be that optimistic and positive when it comes to this combination of leaderships. But at the same time, there are reasons to be hopeful that President Trump's emphasis on the effectiveness of economic sanctions on North Korean behavior is true, because of two reasons. One, given the nature of the Kim Jong-un leadership, the economic sanctions may hurt North Korean economy and the leadership more than ever. Because compared to his grandfather and father, Kim Jong-un was educated and spent a lot of time in his youth in the Western world, in Switzerland. So he's very familiar with a very prosperous and advanced lifestyle and living conditions. So he wouldn't want to be the leader of one of the more poorest countries and backward countries in the world. I guess it is genuine for him to be the king of the prosperous North Korea. So there's a reason that Kim Jong-un leadership may not be so patient and impervious to the pressure of economic sanctions compared to the previous two North Korean leaderships, his grandfathers and his fathers. Second thing is that North Korean population and economy has been fundamentally transformed since the days of the arduous march, the food crisis in late 1990s. After the food crisis in 1990s, the central government of North Korea abandoned the food distribution system and allowed the local and black markets. So basically, North Korean populations these days are independent from the state support. And economic sanctions actually strangle their lifelines, because the North Korean economy has grown in ways to become extremely dependent upon unofficial trade with the outside world, namely China. So when the trade with China has been shrunk because of economic sanctions, the very livelihood of almost all members of the North Korean society have been hit so hard by economic sanctions. So I'm not suggesting that there's a civil society in North Korea ready to revolt against the regime because of economic hardship, but at least North Korean populations who are born with and grew familiar with basic market system have growing resentment and disappointment toward the Kim Jong-un leadership. So economic sanctions are hurting both leadership and the population at the same time compared to North Korea in the past.
Interesting. I want to get one more question in before we go, very briefly. So North Korean state media has shown Kim Jong-un attending a ceremony for his, the 7th anniversary of his father's death, Kim Jong-il. And this was quite a muted affair. But what's interesting, though, he hasn't been seen for about 2 weeks before this. And then before that, he was also missing for about a couple of weeks from North Korean state media. Why do you think there is such little activity going on with Kim Jong-un right now?
My analysis is that his absence was meant to maximize its leverage upon Moon Jae-in government, who had desperately sought to realize Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul before the end of this year in the back hill of the Pyeongyang Declaration on September 19th. So disappearing from the public scene has enforced North Korea's leverage upon South Korea with regard to the potential summit meeting in Seoul before the end of the year. And second reason that he must be really stressed out to decide what will be contained in the content of the New Year's message of the 2019, which is only, less than 3 weeks away? So you must, as a reporter, you must understand the amount of stress that Kim Jong-un has to deal with, try to meet the deadline, right? For a very important speech. So I guess these two reasons account for his absence in December.
Well, that'll be January 1st, 12 p.m. Korea time, I believe, and we'll keep a close eye watch on that, and I'll definitely be working on News Day as well. Anyway, it's good to have you here with us as always.
Thank you.